I recently watched a movie on YouTube. It was called Through The Rye, and I think it's probably one of the worst movies I've ever seen. It's about this kid who, in high school, who is can relate to the character, the protagonist, Holden Caulfield in Catcher in the Rye. He's a loner in high school. He's can't fit in. The jocks, threaten to beat him up. They put fireworks in his bedroom, when he's at boarding school, his dorm room, I should say. And he wants to put on a play. He wants to adapt Catcher in the Rye to a play. And eventually, there's a scene where he actually runs away from the boarding school. He looks for J.D. Salinger to ask him for his permission to do this. And when he shows up, there's this, and the dialogue is terribly written too. Is it the J.D. Salinger's his usual kind of aloof self? Somebody who doesn't want to speak to anybody. Insists that he does not do it because it's meant for the stage in people's minds. It's not meant to be interpreted. He says it as if he's saying something that is so profound. It doesn't even make any sense because obviously the stage in people's minds is all about interpretation. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a clear identifiable subject matter or concept or theme. I mean, there is, obviously. Everyone can agree that it is indeed Catcher in the Rye. We all know the story. But the stage in people's minds, people's imaginations, it consists of a myriad of different interpretations. So it doesn't even make any sense. But eventually, even after this sort of slightly contentious exchange with J.D. Salinger and telling him about all of his woes, all of his troubles in high school, eventually he does put on the play. But I think one line that I remember from the movie that I thought was very strange and didn't make sense to me was when the kid, I forget his name, but who wants to put on the play, the protagonist, he writes in his journal, and this is what pisses off a lot of the jocks at his school. He writes in his journal that the whole world is what he thinks of it, or at least the school that he goes to, that sort of conformist kind of environment is what he calls the machine, like of cynical automatons. But this is another thing that irks me, like is that it's a lot of these terms getting thrown around but not really having a full understanding of what they actually mean. It's like there's something that is, and I've discussed this book before, it's like there's something inherently very hollow about it when you hear it coming from this character in the movie, but you may not even be able to put your finger on why. Well, why is it hollow? And I think obviously when you look at the history of this book, Catcher in the Rye, and some of the things I've discussed about the sort of the kind of fake red pill that it offers, then it makes sense why the movie kind of has many of its weaknesses and why it has many of its limitations. But I think I just want to look more into the whole concept of cynicism in general and dark humor and satire, because I noticed that when certain limits are truly pushed, when the writer really does not play it safe, like when they really want to show the absurdity of human existence or society, it's actually punished, or in some cases it tends to either be banned or it's completely distorted and leaves out all of the things that are actually important. It's like what Oscar Wilde was saying about the books that society calls, the world calls immoral, are actually the books that show the world its own shame. Right? They're not just sort of propagandistic. They're not showing you things that are gratuitously depressing or violent or tragic to push a certain agenda and try to mold people into basically being more submissive. or being less capable of being independent or be able to think clearly. It's the whole point is that they're actually trying to offer some sort of solution. And I guess I'll use an example, right, of this sort of problem, right? Is that there was a movie version of Animal Farm that came out recently, but it was, and many people have talked about how bad it is. It's like a animated movie for kids, but they completely sanitized the movie so much that all the entire point has been completely diminished, right? And that Animal Farm is an example of what you would call dark satire, right? It's a kind of it borders on the surreal, the talking animals, the ridiculous slogans. Some animals are more equal than others, right? It's the Kafkaesque sort of nature that is what makes that book so original and so excellent, right? But all of that got completely eliminated from the movie. And the only things that were consistent with the novel, that were true to the novel, is the fact that the animals are trying to take over. They are trying to basically rebel against the farmer, the big brother figure, right? But everything else is completely tame. It's been completely watered down. Like there's no that whole sort of fascistic movement, that revolution, that the way that the animals are truly corrupted and they essentially they become monsters. That part has been completely left out. It's turned into this sort of song and dance type of story. So I think this is an example of how when somebody truly pushes certain limits, right? When satire reaches that level, it immediately has to be sanitized. But you can, on the other hand, you can have a movie about somebody talking about, ranting about cynical automatons and the machine, and people think that it's really profound, you know. But as I pointed out before, and I'll point it out again, is I think what makes cynicism truly funny is that I think that there's a certain amount of life experience behind it. It has to be sharp, or it has to be witty, and it can't just be, I don't know, it can't, perhaps it can't have that sort of amateur quality that I think that maybe more modern writing can have. And that example you actually see in that horrible movie I saw about J.D. Salinger and the kid.